Hello everybody and welcome back to the CPD Group podcast. Today we have a very special guest. It's Chris Oldham, who is a Senior Policy and Programme Manager at the City of London Corporation Skills and Policy team. Chris also is the lead for the Skills for a Sustainable Skyline Taskforce. So let's have a little chat with Chris and see what this is all about. Welcome, Chris. Thank you very much for joining us and sparing the time to have a quick chat with us today.
Thanks, Andy. Looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris, your professional background.
Sure. So I'm the Senior Policy and Programme Manager here at the City of London Corporation. We're the local authority for London's historic square mile. And we're also at the heart of the financial and professional services sector. Worth saying that we're actually politically neutral, but the only local authority in the UK to be neither Labour nor Conservative nor Lib Dem. And that gives us the freedom to work very much across the UK. Around the UK financial and professional service sector, which is the biggest contributor to government tax receipts. So, really important with our growth agenda, and that kind of feeds into what my work I've been doing for the Skills for a Sustainable Skyline Taskforce, for which I'm the programme lead. My previous backgrounds before coming to the corporation is I've worked in the railway supply sector, doing PR and lobbying work, and then before that I was a primary school teacher, and I also taught a little bit in China as well. Now, I've been a reservist and done a few different interesting things, all of which are kind of fed into that skills and talent and education piece that brought me here today. So what we do is we look at various skills issues relating to the success of the UK and London as a great place to come and do business internationally, particularly so for the UK financial and professional services sector. And all of that leads into the need for having been able to offer business green real estate, sustainable real estate, which is the main focus of the Skills for a Sustainable Skyline Taskforce. The Skyline Taskforce, quite a long name. The Skyline Taskforce, I'll refer to it as. It's all around making sure that we can offer business what they need to be competitive, to grow, which we know from the new Labour government is a real driver, and to be a great place internationally to come and do business and get more investment, more jobs, all of that good stuff.
Fantastic. Sounds like you've got a bit of a busy role out there.
It's not dull. It's not dull, Andy, and it keeps me on my toes, but incredibly rewarding. And we're ultimately looking to work with government, and we're very much on message about making sure that we grow the UK economy. That's more. It's more money in people's pockets. It's better paying jobs. It's all that good stuff. So it's well worth the hard work, I like to think.
Fantastic. So I was doing a little bit of prep, obviously, for the interview today. And I've seen at the task force, you've done a lot of good work. I've read the report that you released in 2023. And then also one of the key features that came out of that for me, considering that we're a CPD accreditation organisation, was the Skills Hub that's been produced in 2024. Sure. So tell us a little bit about the Skills Hub, please, and how that fits into the City of London's wider sustainability and workforce development agenda.
More than happy to. And just take a step backwards, pretty useful context. So the Skyline Taskforce we set up very much to give a voice to the built environment sector. We've got 350 built environment firms who've come together to look at how we can prepare the workforce to deliver green commercial buildings, office buildings, right? In London, but absolutely across the rest of the UK as well. Yeah. And on the back of that piece of work, we had the Skyline Skills Recommendations Report that you mentioned. And then looking at the recommendations report, a lot of the recommendations were very much long-term actions for government, for the GLA, the Great London Authority, and others. And we asked industry, well, what can we do right now? The Skyline Task Force, this collaboration of 350 firms, what can we do in the short term to drive change in the green skills space? And the answer came back that what we don't need is, a brand new boot camp or training course or what have you. What we need to do is be mindful that there's some really good quality work in green upskilling, green reskilling, and attraction of new talent into the built environment workforce. To come and deliver these buildings. And what we need to do is funnel best practice into one place, be really clear about what we want our key audiences to do in terms of responding to the green revolution. And with that in mind, we've pulled that together into Skyline Skills Hub, which is our online resource, our best practice, one-stop shop for green skills. And we've identified four main audiences which we think have a really key role to play in driving the green skills agenda, and those are employers, and by employers we mean building main contractors, building developers, and building clients. So the ones who are setting the agenda for sustainability and for the skills agenda, we want them to buy into this and drive sustainability, diversity, and inclusion. We're at the second main agenda, and by the way, all of these four audiences have a section of the hub dedicated to them with curated resources, curated messaging, so that they understand what they need to do to really buy into the green skills agenda. So that we've got our employers, our developers, our clients. We've got number two, our supply chain, our workforce. So these are the SMEs who in many cases are actually delivering the work, the construction work itself. As we all know, that the construction sector, very few main contracts actually do construction work. They tend to subcontract everything else to their subbies who are actually delivering the work. So we need these people who in many cases can be very, very small construction outfits. Perhaps they're sole traders, perhaps they've got 5, 10, 15, 50 employees, to upskill their own understanding around how sustainability will change their ways of working, their materials, etc., and why they should invest in maybe taking on an apprentice or something like that. So they've got we've got a different ask for them, and we've got some curated existing best practice resources that are relevant to our workforce, our supply chain, our SMEs. The third audience is our new entrants. These are people that have no involvement in the built environment, particularly our young people, our career changes, young people's parents, their teachers, their careers advisors. We're assuming they know nothing. What is a building? Did you know that there are thousands of jobs that you could go, and really rewarding jobs that you can get involved with in the built environment, talking about salary, earning potential, career progression potential, and the chance to go and save the planet. We know that in London, nearly 70% of our carbon emissions come from buildings. So if you want to go and save the planet, by all means, go vegan if you want to. I'm not, full disclosure. By all means, go and fly less. But the biggest impact on saving the planet is reducing the carbon emissions of our buildings, both embodied, so we're talking about the materials now, embodied carbon emissions, and the operational, the lighting, the heating. So new entrants, why should they come work in the built environment, get trained up, and start their career in the built environment? And then the fourth one is policymakers. We're talking about government departments, local authorities, and training providers. Why should that sector really buy into this agenda and start using policy to drive sustainability, and then training a workforce up to deliver that sustainability as well? So we've got four areas: employers, workforce, new entrants, and policymakers. And we've got a section for the Skyline Skills Hub for each of them. Very pleased to say that we've had brilliant take-up so far. I've been rather busy, not to flatter myself, but speaking as far and wide as I can, and using our task force members to do the same, to talk about this new Skyline Skills Hub, to raise awareness. We're up to last quarter, we had 1.5 average 1.5 million hits per month on average. And again, spread across the three areas, the four areas of the hub, I should say. So really, really good engagement. People are using this; they see it as useful to get very quickly what it is they need to do and how to go about that, what best practice looks like, rather than sitting there trying to Google for hours about, well, how do I get, how do I start my career? What trade should I go and do, or what profession should I go into? Why would I want to go and do that? It's all of those key questions we try and talk about in a really accessible way. There's loads of video clips, people that don't want to scroll down and read information. So we try to make it as engaging as we can, and a way to really shift the dial on what can be a very hard to access sector. I think before the Skyline Skills Hub, it was very hard to know where to signpost people to if they wanted to understand, well, what really is sustainability? Why should I care about it? Or what's the built environment? Is it worth me working there? And now we've got a place we can push everyone to in one place and get them excited and engaged, enthused, and actually buying into this agenda and joining the workforce and upskilling their understanding around sustainability, so we can deliver our commercial buildings. And that absolutely goes, by the way, for residential buildings, that we need more people as well. And I know Labour's announced they want 1.5 million new homes. Well, where's the workforce going to come from? And we think, even though the language we're using is around London, we think for the rest of the UK and for the residential sector, we've got a lot of content on the Skyline Skills Hub that's equally beneficial and equally relevant. So we're mindful that we're using commercial London language, but actually a lot of the content that we're using is beneficial to the rest of the UK and for Resi as well.
Sounds fantastic resource, absolutely.
We
Well,
hope so.
yeah. You mentioned green skills a few times there. So why are green skills so critical right now? And what's in place, alongside the Skills Hub to kind of accelerate the shift towards that more green skills focus?
Really good question, Andy. And I think part of our big challenge is the government's net zero target by 2050. It's, we're 2025, only 25 years to go before we're meant to be net zero. We've also got a lot of legislation in place that is driving that. For example, we've got the government's minimum energy efficiency standards, MEES, that it takes, for example, that by 2027, 2028, pardon me, that all commercial buildings are meant to be EPC C or above, and if they're not, they're technically unleasable. And that then goes up to EPC B, so Energy Performance Certificate, to EPC B by 2030. So in theory, if by 2030 you and I are talking and your commercial asset, your commercial office building that you own is below EPC-B, you can't lease it out. I mean, that has a fundamental impact on the value of your assets. By the way, our pension pots are largely invested in commercial real estate, so there's a broader thing there. And we know that the scale of the challenge is huge. For EPCC, the stats that we looked at were about 60% of buildings in London are below EPCC, so before you even get to B or A. And about half of buildings in London don't have an EPC. So actually, the scale could be even wider than that. It's a phenomenal amount of work. And we know that the majority of it's going to be looking at retrofit. So by 2050, 80% of buildings in 2050 are already standing. So about 80% of these projects are going to be looking at our existing buildings, not tearing it down, working in a different way, retrofitting and refurbishing them. That's no small feat. We know as well, particularly to get to EPC-B, there's a lot of work needed around energy data. So, smart meters in our buildings, and then processing that data and using it in a smart way to make sure that we're heating and lighting our buildings according to demand. And not just, as someone said to me recently, when I go to London, I see all these office buildings that are on all weekend and no one's working there. What gives? That needs to change. The challenge is as much actually around mindset change of how we operate and run these buildings as it is of how we construct them. There's a lot of work there around building operation. And when we see green skills, we're talking about the full project life cycle of a sustainable building. It's building design, it's building construction, it's retrofit, and crucially operations, repairs, and in use as well. Really key. And we know that's going to impact not just construction roles or people with sustainability or environment in a job title, but everybody needs to understand how their role will have to change in order to run that overall asset in a more sustainable way, and to think about materials and all of that good stuff. So it's a huge challenge. We know that the sector's been requiring leadership, and what we've tried to do at the City Corporation is be the convening body to bring them together, to give the built environment sector some ownership and some leadership there. So our task force is chaired by our own deputy policy chairman, Keith Bottomley, and his deputy is Charles Begley, who's chief executive of the London Property Alliance. We've got our political voice with City Corporation giving some leadership there, as well as Charles Begley from industry, who's giving his industry leadership to try and convene us other 350 firms together to start doing things differently. And absolutely, the Skyline Skills Hub is part of the solution. It's not all of it. So one of the we certainly see that we see the hub as being an evolving resource, really. So it's not going to be a one and done thing. We need to keep this relevant. We need to keep it fresh and engaging. So we're constantly thinking of ways to add to that. And an ask on your viewers would be that if they're aware of some best practice in green upskilling, reskilling, or attraction that needs to be on the hub, please do reach out. I'm sure you can share my details afterwards, Andy. But one idea that we're trying to bring onto the hub to add value is we're launching in October a new future Skyline Skills commitment. And the commitment is going to be an industry pledge where large constructors or developers will work with their supply chain to support their supply chain to do the hard work of actually hiring new untrained talent. Right. So the outcome for this, we hope, will be lots of new job opportunities for young people and mid-career changers who are not in the sector, bring them into the sector. We know that overall workforce size needs to expand, Depending what data set you look at, we think we need in London about 250,000 additional workers by, I think it's 2035. It's a hell of a lot of people, and we need to get this. We know supply chain are doing the hiring and firing. We need to bring them on board to get them to start changing their way of hiring people, to hire talent that maybe hasn't got the experience, but they actually train them up and give them that experience, rather than hiring the same kind of the same older pool of talent that we know that we know they're retiring at a fast rate of knots. We need to start doing this differently. We need to take a risk and invest and invest in these people who perhaps are younger people, or perhaps they've come from a different sector that haven't got the experience. We need to give them that. So this new Future Scaling Skills commitment is trying to reward those suppliers and those developers who are working towards that agenda of increasing new talent opportunities. Excellent. And that'll go on the hub when it goes live in October as well. So we again, we're trying to bring it all back together to the Skyline Skills Hub, but to be looking at really innovative ways that we can add value then and pull some additionality in.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. So in terms of that growing workforce and, the numbers you mentioned of the amount of new people that are required in the industry, what specific roles or skill sets are currently in the highest demand for delivering that sustainable commercial building, like in the London sort of area?
Sure, and it's a really hard question to answer, because in a way we know that we need more of everybody, right? But there's particular skills demands around the trades, and I'll see if I can bring up the actual stats. But we know that there's quite a lot of roles that are non-construction roles that we know are needed to deliver the pipeline of work that we've got. And I think I've got the stat just here. There we go. There's an annual demand of 34,400 people in central London to do non-construction work. So we're talking about professional roles here, so architecture, technical roles, IT, and other office-based roles. And that's in addition to, we need trades for carpenters and bricklayers as well. I think about the Chancellor's recent announcement of funding into construction skills training, and I think she used the phrase chippies, sparkies, and brickies. Probably not terms that I would choose to use, but we know that we need more tradespeople, and we need more people involved in building design, and particularly in use operation. We know the operation of retrofit buildings is a particular challenge of getting people involved in repairs and maintenance, and as well as quite a lot of digital skills needs emerging around how we use digital twins and other platforms and BIM and BSM to monitor and track the energy usage in these buildings, and then transit that into some action. Do we need to start putting in smart operations to automatically turn off lighting and heating when rooms are not in use? Do we need to repair elements of the building to make it operate in a more efficient way? So there's lots of technical and data skills actually that are coming out of this as well. And I think that's really relevant when we think about how we attract new talent in. We know young people are brilliant at digital skills. We know that it's an area that many of them are very passionate about. We can use those digital skill sets to come and run buildings in a more efficient way, as well as looking at traditional trades. We need those as well. These are well-paying jobs with brilliant career progression potential. A number of people that I've met who are chief exec level, who began their careers not as graduates but actually as tradespeople, and then worked their way through the ladder, as it were. How many sectors can really say that that success and progression isn't reliant on having a university degree, but you can come in at 16 as a tradesperson and go and succeed. And we know we need those tradespeople desperately, as well as those more digital and technical people as well. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, Chris. Super. So you mentioned there the skills gaps that you've identified through the task force, and those key areas where you need more for the workforce, more people on the ground. Have you, through the Skills Hub, developed any kind of particular framework or anything like that will help training providers to develop CPD courses or qualifications that will help support, training those individuals into those key roles?
Again, this goes back to that initial challenge from our Skyline Taskforce members, those 350 firms. What do we do in the short term? And their voice that came back very strongly was, no, we don't need the Skyline Taskforce to come and create a new training pathway. It's duplication. right? And I think there's so much risk in the built environment space, the skill space, of duplicating really good work that's ongoing. So rather than that, we're not. What we've done is we've looked at what's already out there to train people up, and bring them to a baseline of understanding around sustainability that we've put in our Skyline skills. And one of the best resources that we signpost to, not that we've got a list of best ones, but they're all best practice. But one of my favourites is the Supply Chain Sustainability Schools library of free resources. They're all online, easily accessible, all free to access. And they're a brilliant way, I think, if you were, for example, an SME and perhaps your time poor, perhaps your margins are quite tight in terms of investing in your people. It's a free way and a really quick way of getting your people to understand how what they're doing on every level. It's all tailored to the supply chain who are actually delivering the work as well. How every role that they could be doing is impacted by the drive to sustainability. In really simple words, easy to access. They can do it on the mobile devices while they're on the way to work. There are other offers on there on the Skyline Skills Hub that I'd recommend colleagues go and have a look at. But personally, I think the Supply Chain Sustainability School is one of the better offers to very quickly and effectively upskill everyone's understanding around everybody from the bricklayer or the person, the labourer on site, through to your project managers and building clients. Will be affected and need to understand how the implications of sustainability on their work.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in terms of again, building that workforce, so what strategies are currently being explored, Chris, that will attract and train more people from diverse backgrounds into the workforce, and particularly those people from underrepresented communities?
So going back to, as I mentioned, the future Skyline Skills commitment, we've tried to make that a comprehensive industry pledge with supporting resources to meet a few of those objectives, Andy. So there's 4 levels to the commitment. Again, we're launching this in October. And again, second ask to your viewers is, if your firm isn't currently signed up to this, please do. We've got currently, we're looking at 100 firms at least for our launch. So, and we've got our top 50, just add a bit of competition. The first 50 firms will be our early adopters, and we'll give them that recognition, the fact that they've got in early. So I'll leave that there for your viewers to think of. But the commitment's got four levels that we see as being the journey for how we become better at attracting a new workforce. So the first level is all about driving inclusivity on your workplaces, your building sites. And the reason why we're focusing on that is we know that it can be very daunting if you're a person from an underrepresented background. Perhaps you're a young woman, or perhaps you're a person of colour, and that you get onto site and you can't see anybody else who looks like you. There can be cultural issues around how we've treated people in the past compared to how people want to be treated now. And this inclusivity piece is around actually making sure that when people come to our workplaces, they want to work there. We know retention is a massive challenge in the sector, and around challenging someone's working practices around, particularly long hours and, unpleasant conditions. We want to change that. We need to create places people want to come work. And then level 2 is then going out to schools and colleges and universities and community groups and speaking to people who would never normally have thought about the built environment as a sector, and saying, look, here are the opportunities that we can offer you to come work for us. So it's that engagement piece. And level 3 then is actually recruiting people. So we ask our member firms to offer employment opportunities to people. Rather than talking about it, do it, right? And then by then we've created a place that we can bring them in, and they feel mentored, they feel safe, they feel happy and secure, and they stay, right? Because otherwise this is you're wasting time and money by hiring people who get to site, feel uncomfortable, feel that they're not safe, and then leave. That's also a waste of your time and investment as well. So that's why we've got the order as inclusivity or safety, and then engagement, and then actually hiring. And then the 4th element, level 4, is all around work collaborating then with other industry, with other companies. So it's going beyond what's good for you and going out to what's good for the sector, and starting to work together and collaborate to challenge those bigger sort of barriers to attracting talent. I would say as well, by the way, that joining the commitment is completely free. There's no charge involved. It's, we're doing this for the good of the sector, and we just want to see change. And we know that there's some brilliant firms. We've got likes of Kelp Brain, Eon Energy that are already signed up to this, who are really keen to see that agenda made real and to bring in the workforce that we need. We know we've got an issue where a lot of young people now are finishing their construction courses and no one will hire them because of these very old-fashioned ways of thinking around. We'll go with trained, experienced talent rather than taking a risk and investing in the new generation.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you talk about collaboration there as well, with universities, etc. So, what kind of collaboration is happening between you guys at the task force and these educational institutions and training providers to help, deliver those green skills at scale?
Sure. We've recognised it's a need. We've included the training providers as one of the audiences for our Skyline Skills Hub, and we've tried to show them then what they need to do to make sure that their courses are reflective of the needs of industry. But we've very much focused our work on engaging with supply chain and engaging with your tier 1, tier 2 contractors. However, one of the asks that we're building into the future Skyline Skills commitment will be for one of our level 4 asks for those firms that want to go beyond just working on their own practice and actually then collaborating, is around can our level 4 firms share some of their staff with particularly the FE provider sector, where we know that there's a chronic shortage of tutors. The FE sector simply aren't able to offer the levels of salaries to attract trained people from industry. We think the supply chain's got a role to play there by lending out some of their senior staff to act as tutors, and then there's a sort of a two-tier win there. There's kind of a trainer thing. Then other tutors who aren't from industry can learn from people that have been lent from industry. We can then make sure that the courses that have been provided offer the actual skills and knowledge that young people need, that are needed by employers. And actually, for the employer's perspective, it means that they're getting a pipeline of talent through that are trained and equipped to the standard and with the knowledge and skills that they need to then be effective on site. So we think it actually does work as well to the employer's favour, but we recognise that it's an investment of time. This new commitment badge is a way of giving them recognition for that they can use when they're procuring goods and services, and to try and make sure they can win work. Why wouldn't we want to reward our firms that are doing the good work of attracting new people and being more inclusive to win more work? Of course we do. That's what it's all about. We all need to turn a profit, and we think that we believe this new badge will be a really powerful way to do that. We're saying that some of the firms that will sign up to this will be our main building clients and big developers, and we're asking them to recognise the badge in subcontractors and main contractors to make sure that the right people can win work. We want to favour those firms that are really leaning into the skills and sustainability agenda.
Absolutely. It sounds like you're doing some fantastic work out there, Chris, and it needs to continue if possible. Is the task force planning on continuing after 2025?
So the task force will come to an end in December 2025, whereas my time will still be dedicated, although a bit less of it, to maintaining the Skyline Skills Hub. We need to keep this going in perpetuity, and certainly as well for monitoring the future Skyline Skills commitment. As well, to make sure that on the hub that stays, we will have an annual badge that people keep applying for, so to reflect that just because you were doing brilliant work in 2026, you need to keep it up for 2027, and ideally get on to the next level and progress in your journey to be the most inclusive employer you can be. So we'll be maintaining the assets themselves, but the collaborative model from the city corporation perspective will take a step backwards. Our ambition at this stage is that somebody, maybe this is one for your viewers as well, that somebody will step in and help to maintain that collaboration. One of our ideas is somebody with the space in the office in London to host people could certainly convene groups, if not all of the task force. We've been convening groups of about 50 to 100 people in the task force together over our journey, to maintain that conversation and to look at, okay, the Skyline Task Force was our starting point, right? It lit the match. what do we need to do collaboratively as a sector now to work together and take some ownership and take it on to the conversation to the next level. Last thing I'll mention is that we're planning an engagement campaign to use the Skyline Taskforce as a case study, and then share that case study with the mayoral combined authorities across the UK. Obviously, I'm not from London, as you can probably hear, Andy. So it'll be, you know, with great pleasure to come back to my native Leeds, and indeed to Manchester, Birmingham. We'd like to go to Belfast and Glasgow and Edinburgh as well, and Cardiff, and speak to many of the UK cities that are having the same issues with attracting and upskilling the workforce to deliver buildings, both residential and commercial. And actually, again, to reiterate, even though we've looked at commercial buildings in London, because that's the challenge we're trying to fix, we think a lot of what we've learned is absolutely relevant and credible for attracting a residential built environment workers. And we know that, again, with the government's 1.5 million homes that they want the UK to build, learnings like the ones that we can share through the Skyline Taskforce as a case study, we think are really useful. We want to try and drive that wider impact across the UK to make sure that we can get access to a workforce, including for residential as well. But we see this very much as we've done the first part of the puzzle. Now what comes next is we need to be really open and collaborative and share that learning, and look at how what we've done in London will be relevant to Birmingham. Absolutely, you know, every different region will have its own challenges, and we'll have to adapt what we've learned to make sure that it's appropriate to a Cardiff or a Glasgow or a Belfast context. But we think there's a lot of crossover there as well. So we'll be looking throughout Q3 and 4 of this year, of then actually reaching out to the regions and seeing where we can add some value there as well.
Excellent. I mean, last year I visited the Future Build event, which is a fantastic event that we accredited in London. And a lot of the conversations I was having with the training providers that were present was around retrofit, which you've also mentioned here as well today. You know, so retrofit is being framed as being, you know, not only great for climate change, etc., but also great job opportunities for the new workforce and, you know, feeding new people into that kind of environment. So how do you think, in terms of retrofit, do you balance the environmental goals of retrofitting with the economic realities that exist?
I think I go back to the idea about retrofit as I see it, based on what we've learned, has been a journey that it doesn't carry necessarily that you can click your fingers and take your EPC D rated building to an EPCA. And in many cases, actually, I go back to the stat that we quoted before, that about half buildings in London don't have an EPC. So in our Skyline Skills recommendation report, we recommend getting an EPC to know where your baseline is your first step. And then you know, it's recognizing that repairing and maintaining the building and then enhancing its sustainability is a process. You know, it's probably not a one-off event, and I think this does absolutely change, you know, how we think about value in our buildings. I would argue that sometimes we're very, very quick to say, "Oh, well, retrofit's expensive," to which I would say, with the greatest respect, not being an engineer or a constructor, that so is building a brand new building with all your demolition costs, having to get rid of the waste, and then building it from the ground up is a phenomenally expensive undertaking. Whereas what we're talking about is a gradual, it'll almost be like a tax, as I see it, to keep the building safe and stable and efficient, to expand its lifespan. It goes back to that change in that change in behaviour and ways of working. You know, I think it's as much that our building clients and our facility management teams need to change how we see about a building's value for retrofit, as it is around the actual materials, smart meters themselves. It's a difference in mindset that we think we need to implement. But you know, over the long term, I'm struggling to with the idea that it's more expensive to keep an existing building with all of that concrete, etc. Embodied, rather than tearing it all down and building a brand new one. Again, it's seeing it, I think, in those terms that I find the most helpful, and as well about seeing the journey to sustainability, to getting to an EPCA or BREEAM Excellent, or you know, UK Neighbours, or some other good metrics as well, has been a journey and not a one-off event. It's Rome wasn't built in a day, and I certainly think it'll take many building owners some time to get to where they want to be.
So on that note then, so what do you think are the main barriers for people kind of considering the retrofit option rather than the rebuild? I mean, is it a cost thing, as you mentioned? Some people are saying that the cost is too high to retrofit their building. Is it regulation? Is there too much red tape in the way? Or is it simply the lack of awareness maybe?
I think there's a bit of all those things, Andy. I think there's certain a lack of awareness around the actual costs involved. I think they're often less than a generally perceived. There's now some brilliant best practice both in the UK and internationally. We know that Norway, Denmark, Sweden, etc. are quite a bit farther ahead of their thinking than we are around the actual cost it takes to start retrofitting a building to make it more sustainable. Some of it is, I think, awareness then of how to go about the process. There's a lot of arguments we've had internally around, well, how do you define sustainability? Are you pushing towards EPCs? Is it about BREEAM? Is it about UK neighbours? And there's many others as well. We personally take a very holistic view, and we take the one that's by the UK Green Building Council's definition, that it's all of them. It's one. We know that there's a lot of critique about EPC, that it's all about operational carbon emissions rather than embodied carbon emissions, which BREEAM would look at. But we know the legislation talks about EPC, and I think there's a lot about being really realistic around, okay, well, where are we? Not where would we be in some dream world, but we're using the government's talking in terms of EPC, so I think we probably should be as well, personally. And it's incremental improvements. I think it's a key thing to take away. It's incremental improvements to, and some of that can be even ways of working. Turning off lights and heating as you go. It doesn't all need to be as expensive. And I think tying it back to the skills element, one of the big costs around any construction work, including retrofit, is the cost of labour. And we know that the cost of labour, with a small L, referring to the government there, that the cost of labour is artificially high because we have an endemic skills gap. And I think until we start to attract a wider pool of talent in, we won't be able to reduce the cost of labour back to something that actually reflects market rate. I think some of the salaries, it's brilliant for people working in the sector of how high they are, but for trying to get any work done, it's artificially expensive. And I think that goes back to the business case for the skills gap. This is costing firms money because labour prices are artificially high, and they won't fall until we significantly expand our workforce size and we start to get a bit more competitivity in terms of salaries, which will then impact the retrofit sector as well. We need to, I think, particularly focus on retrofit careers, because we know that many young people don't even know about construction, let alone the fact that retrofit will be a huge market of opportunity as well, that they can come work in. We know that there isn't currently a direct retrofit apprenticeship. One of the things that we think would be beneficial for government is to look at a commercial retrofit apprenticeship that explicitly gives us knowledge and behaviours around retrofit works for commercial buildings. So yeah, that's kind of how the lens that I see it through is very much around that it's incremental adjustments. It's seeing the business benefit of maintaining the asset rather than tearing it down and building a new one. It's very much going to be meeting your asset where you are, not where you wish you were. I personally think that because the government has tied itself to the language of EPC, that probably is the language that we should start using, as well as BREEAM, etc. And it's seeing the value in investing in expanding the workforce size so that we can eventually bring down costs for all kinds of construction work, including for retrofit.
Fantastic, Chris. Fantastic. Now, I do appreciate you're a busy man, but I'd just like to thank you very much for joining us today. Now, the work you and your colleagues are doing on that task force sounds fantastic, to be fair. So you're really supporting the sector. So well done. And I hope that collaboration continues after December 25 when the task force wraps up a little bit and you've shared that learning with everybody, and then hopefully, as you mentioned, it can be taken around the country or around the various countries within the UK and, implemented there as well. Well, the world, absolutely. Chris, absolutely. So again, thank you very much for joining us and keep up the good work. And we will release all your personal information, if you know what I mean, so that people can contact you and get involved with the commitment that you're launching as well. So again, thank you very much for joining us. And yes, we'll speak again in the future, hopefully.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Andy. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.